You're listening to Villainess. Written by Kevin Wong.
Read by Roxanne Nylen.
The sun beat down on the quarry and its sweaty inhabitants. Heat pressed in from all sides, even in the dry air. The three of us had foregone the scalding metal benches in favor of a small spot in the shade of a boulder. Vergil sat next to the radio, listening to the news and eating beans straight from the can. Like me, he was in his 20s, but augmentation had wrinkled his skin and speckled his hair with gray. Despite us being the same age, he looked like he could have been my dad. Wes and I sat beside him, munching on our sandwiches. Time had been kinder to us, but not by much. The scratchy voice of the newscaster droned over our chewing.
In sports news, the Titans pulled a narrow victory over the Benton Giants in the quarterfinals thanks to an incredible shot by Corey Williams. Can we get a replay on that, Hank? Holy crap, that must have been a 6-yard jump.
It's really a shame you weren't there, Katja,
Wes said, elbowing me to get my attention.
Never seen anything like it.
Maybe next time, I replied, making no attempt to hide my disinterest. It was cool seeing players leap halfway across the field in a single bound like superheroes, but it was also depressing. With that much augmentation, you hardly lasted 3 seasons before you were old and gray. No one forced you to do it, but fans were so used to it that it had been decades since anyone natural had played in the major league.
What's amazing is they say he's the least augmented player on the team.
After a jump like that? I don't buy it.
Well, it might be true. Remember when he tore his ACL last summer? He was out for almost the entire season. Everyone else was back after a month or two.
I'd just started to tune out the noise and focus on my sandwich when one of the news stories caught my ear.
And finally, some good news for the counterterrorism effort. A tip from an anonymous source has resulted in the largest victory to date against the so-called Liberation Front. Over a dozen terrorists were arrested by the Justice Patrol while raiding a warehouse in South Millwood Park. Ringleader Dalton Whitaker was rumored to be there, but was not found during the raid.
My stomach nodded. I hadn't seen my brother in 4 years, and we'd started drifting apart even before he'd run off to join the Liberation Front. But I'd always looked up to him growing up. Since then, I'd kept our kinship secret, and the less I had to talk or think about him, the better. Raids like these were fairly common, but hearing about them never got easier.
Maybe this means we can finally get some peace around here.
Maybe. Until another group of miners gets trapped in a cave-in and there's no one left to save them. Hey, Katja, isn't it weird you two have the same last name? He's not your cousin or something, is he?
No, just a coincidence. I stuffed the rest of my sandwich into my mouth and walked out into the boulder field before Wes or Vergil could say anything else. Wes stood at the cracked end of the boulder, a 60-pound sledgehammer hanging casually from his loose grip. I stood to the side with a wheelbarrow, ready to catch my half of the 10-ton slab of limestone the instant it came crashing down. Vergil had his own wheelbarrow, ready on the other side. "You good?" I called out to Wes. He nodded and wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. He looked around to make sure Vergil and I were ready, then brought the hammer down on top of the iron wedge with a metallic clank. The crack running between the wedges widened, slowly at first, then all at once. A wall of rock rushed toward me. I took half a step back and angled the wheelbarrow slightly, feeling a thunderous vibration through the handlebars as it absorbed the massive impact. The wheelbarrow swayed, and I dug one heel into the dirt and leaned to counterbalance. It wobbled uncertainly, and for a second it looked like I had it steady. Then, despite all my efforts, rock and cart toppled onto me. What happened next was a blur. I felt the immense pressure of the rock pinning me against the dirt, arms braced desperately against the rock to prevent it from crushing my head and torso. My legs were being crushed, but I couldn't tell how bad it was with the adrenaline coursing through my body. I heard panicked yelling coming from Wes and Vergil, but my ears were ringing too loudly for me to make out what they were saying. The impossible weight on top of me shifted, sending new waves of agony across my arms and legs. I tried to scream, but only a wheeze came out. Wes yelled something, and the pressure on my arms lessened. I was hit with the blinding light of the sun as the boulder was rolled off of me, crashing down by my side with a thunderous impact.
I'll take care of her. Go get Modi.
Vergil's footsteps faded into the distance as he went to fetch the world's most useless human. Wes knelt over me, but I couldn't see his expression.
Are you okay?
I could tell he was trying to keep his voice calm. I squinted against the sun and looked up at my arms, frozen in the air to brace against a rock that was no longer there. They were shaking and slick with blood. It wasn't until I tried to speak that I realized I was holding my breath. I think... I forced myself to sit up. My arms looked and felt like hell, but they'd heal. My legs... I didn't want to think about my legs. The pain had started to register, and it was bad. I tried wiggling them clumsily and almost passed out. Fuck. I laid my head back down in the dirt and tried to think of something else. Anything else.
You're gonna be okay. I promise.
I held my tongue. Vergil had an accident like this happen a couple years back, and Modi hadn't wanted him taking more than a week off. Doubling his augmentation was the only way for him to recover fast enough, but it had taken years off his life. It seemed like a horrible trade, until you realized you wouldn't live long enough to die young if you starved first.
Come on, let's get you up.
Wes righted the wheelbarrow beside me. The reinforced steel tray had held up better than my flattened body, but one of the legs was bent. I was lifted and placed into the tray like a rag doll. Thankfully, he'd filled the bottom with dirt and threw his shirt over the rim so my skin didn't burn against the metal. I let my head loll back against the wheelbarrow and looked up at Wes as he carted me up the switchbacks leading out of the quarry.
How are you feeling?
Like shit. But I'll live.
This is your first major injury since augmenting, right?
More like a near-death experience, but yeah. They're definitely right about what it does to your pain tolerance.
What degree are you again? 3?
2.5. I tried not to think about the fact that I'd be dead in 20 years, but I'd done the math too many times to forget.
It's a minor miracle you're not dead.
I'm crippled. It's a miracle! He was right, of course. We were still heading up the switchbacks when Vergil returned.
How's Katja doing?
Smushed. I'm feeling smushed. What did Shitstain have to say?
Oh, he was in the middle of an important phone call. Said you'd have to come speak with him yourself.
I had to laugh at that. It wasn't funny, really, but you could only be angry for so long. Vergil held the door open as Wes pushed me into Modi's office. The sudden chill of the air conditioner made me shiver, but provided some relief to the lifeless pain sacks dangling from my knees. Modi must have been done with his important phone call, because he made no attempt to contain his distress when he glanced down at my legs.
Fuck!
Modi clutched at his hair and paced around the room like a cartoon character come to life. Sorry to inconvenience you.
How did this happen? Was this her fault?
Crushed by a boulder. Equipment failure.
Wes pointed at the bent leg of the wheelbarrow. It seemed kind of redundant since the wheelbarrow rested at an obvious angle, but when it came to Modi, you had to temper your expectations. Modi's face went pale. He looked like he wanted to dump the wheelbarrow in a lake to destroy the evidence, possibly with me still inside. The moment he found an angle to grasp, his look of horror turned back to accusation.
How big was the boulder? Was it within regulation?
It was marked as under capacity. So either it was marked incorrectly, or the wheelbarrow was defective.
Modi resumed his pacing. He looked like he was about to have an ulcer.
I'll send that information up the chain. You and Vergil can leave. I need to speak with Katja privately.
Vergil turned and left without a word. Wes gave me a concerned look, but left when I gave him a nod of reassurance.
I just got off the phone with the director. We just got a huge landscaping contract, and our monthly quota has increased 25%. This incident couldn't have happened at a worse time.
I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I already knew what was coming.
I'm willing to offer an hourly raise if you agree to increase your degree of augmentation and return to work on Monday. And since this would allow all of us to meet the quota, I'm sure Wes and Vergil would appreciate you being a team player.
I pictured the story of my life, a binding loose from where all the pages had been torn out from the back. In my mind, I saw Modi pinching half of what remained between his thumb and forefinger, ready to pull. And if I refuse?
If you're unable to perform at the same capacity as the rest of the team, I will have to give you a pay cut commensurate with your performance.
When he saw I wasn't going to answer, he added,
I can tell you're in a lot of pain. This will help. It'll be a win for everyone involved.
Modi approached me with an augmentation kit and pulled the needle from the vial. Something in me snapped. My hand shot out and grabbed his wrist before he could prick me with it. I felt his unaugmented bones flex under the strength of my grip. Put that down before I snap your fucking arm in half. Wordlessly, Modi lowered the hand holding the needle, and I allowed him to pull his arm free.
See you Monday.
Maybe I'll take 2 weeks and see if the director throws you into the quarry with the rest of us.
So, what are you going to do?
Wes asked as he carted me back to my house. The bravado I'd put on in front of Modi was gone. Now that the anger had subsided, I was left planning which meals to skip and tending to a broken body. I don't know.
Everyone's got to eat. I won't think less of you if you do it.
Yeah, but I will. Just imagine how smug he'll be if I cave.
And if you don't, what then? Unless you have some secret third option, you're gonna have to swallow your pride.
If you wanted help meeting that stupid quota, you could have just said that. Wes was silent until we got to my house.
You should lay down and get some rest. I'd tell you to get help, but...
If I could afford help, I wouldn't be working at the quarry.
Right. Can you walk?
I gripped the edge of the wheelbarrow with both hands and hoisted myself up and over, making an elegant belly flop next to the front door.
You could have asked me to help.
I gritted my teeth and forced myself into a sitting position. With some effort, I managed to fish out my keys and unlock the door. I'm okay. Really. Thanks for the ride, Wes. You'd better get back. Wouldn't want to miss your quota. Wes gave me an uncomfortable look. I could tell he wanted to make sure I was all right, but the quota was no joke. And now he and Vergil would be scrambling to meet it on their own.
Be careful, all right?
Wes swiveled the wheelbarrow around and began walking it back to the quarry. The first thing I did was crawl over to the closet and dig out an old crutch Dad had used during his injury a few years back. Dad was at work, and Mom must have been out, so for the time being it looked like I was on my own. The sting in my arms hit fresh and sharp as I sat in the tub and did my best to scrub the dirt and sand off. Eventually, the debris and blood gave way to purple bruises underneath, so dark they were almost black. Accelerated healing had taken care of the scrapes, but deep bruising like this would take several days to heal. My legs were much worse. Just looking at them made me slightly nauseous. A pebble the size of my fingertip was almost completely buried in my leg. I had to bite a rag while I dug it out with my fingers. Hardly an inch of my skin resembled its original color, and now that the adrenaline had started to wear off, all it took was a gentle touch for my legs to feel as though they were being stabbed everywhere at once. No amount of augmentation could heal nerve damage. As I turned the handle on the bedroom door, I realized how great it would feel to just relax and be a rag doll for a few hours. In my exhaustion, I failed to notice the elderly man sleeping in my bed until I was practically sitting on him. I screamed and shoved myself back away from the bed, stumbling over my crutch and collapsing on the floor. "Who are you?" The man shot up instantly, face hard and alert.
Katja, it's me!
"What are you doing in my house? What do you—" My eyes widened as my shock turned to recognition. Dalton? I hobbled over to him as quickly as I could and threw my arms around him. It shouldn't have been surprising that he looked so old. I hadn't seen him in several years, and if the wanted posters were to be believed, he had at least a 10th degree augmentation. This would have made him at least 70 in natural years. What are you doing here?
Needed to go somewhere safe.
What? I pulled away enough to look him over. Dried blood caked Dalton's shirt. From the looks of it, he'd been shot in the shoulder and side. What happened? Are you okay?
The Justice Patrol burned down the warehouse. I'll be fine in a day, maybe less. You don't look so good yourself.
I looked down at my bruises. There was no real way to play this off. A boulder fell on me at the quarry. Dalton surveyed the marks carefully. You shouldn't have come here. You know Mom and Dad side with the state.
As far as I know, maybe you do too.
I sighed and collected my thoughts. 2 years ago, there had been a cave-in at the mine where Dalton used to work, leaving 8 miners trapped. The mining company refused to coordinate a rescue mission, saying it was too dangerous. The Liberation Front kidnapped 8 students from a fraternity, all children of cabinet members or corporate executives, and threatened to kill one for every miner that perished. 2 miners and 2 students died before the company rescued the other 6. I don't know. I don't like the way things are. I know it's not right that everyone in the hills gets to live twice as long as we do, and they aren't breaking their backs in the mines. I know that's not okay, but those kids never hurt anyone.
Neither did the miners. 6 of them lived because of us. 6 friends.
Dalton broke off into a fit of coughing. His condition had started when he was working in the coal mines, but that had been years ago, before he left home. You're still sick?
No cure for black lung. Doesn't matter how fast your clock is ticking.
I heard the front door open downstairs.
Katja, could you come down here for a minute?
She can't know I'm here.
I know. I grabbed the crutch and hobbled downstairs.
Katja, what happened?
There was an accident at the quarry. I'll be fine.
It looks pretty serious. Why don't you head up to bed and get some rest? I'll bring you dinner and you can tell me what happened.
Actually, I'm not hungry, but I think I will get some rest.
Oh, by the way, the Justice Patrol are looking for leads on Dalton. I told them I'd be willing to help, so they'll be here soon to take down information. Just wanted to let you know in case you hear any commotion.
I tried to bite my tongue, but the frustration was too strong. Why? Why help them? Why can't you just leave it alone?
Because it's the right thing to do. Dalton made his choice. You remember the fights we had before he left. Even back then, he was becoming radicalized, but now? Katja, he's done so much damage. I can't stand by while he's out there hurting people.
It's not like he's just doing it for fun. You know the system is rigged. Dalton is suffering from it. I'm suffering from it.
Violence isn't the answer. There has to be some semblance of order, otherwise it's just chaos. You and your brother should both understand that.
I know that, okay? I'm not the one out there burning down buildings, but you have to at least understand why he does. My brother isn't the monster you think he is.
Katja, I know you and your brother are close. I know you looked up to him when you were growing up, and it's really sweet that you're trying to protect him, but a lot of people are dead because of him. He's not the same innocent boy you grew up with. He's dangerous.
Mom and I both turned at the sound of Dalton rushing down the stairs.
The Justice Patrol's outside. I need to go.
Mom took a step back, her face white with terror. It was sad seeing how effective the news had been in making her afraid of her own son.
It's not too late to turn yourself in.
You do know the Justice Patrol never arrests anyone, right? Last night they gunned down everyone that surrendered in cold blood.
Dalton turned and gave me a sad smile.
I'm really happy I got to see you one last time.
My throat closed up when I realized Dalton was leaving. Again. I'd spent 4 years convinced I would never see him again. 4 years of the news constantly reminding me how he was a traitor and a terrible human being. 4 years of my mom saying he was dead to her. 4 years lying about being related to him, telling friends and coworkers that our last names were just a coincidence. 4 years wondering if today was the day I'd see him riddled with bullets on the news. In that time, I'd learned to hide those feelings, to push down the fear and sadness and abandonment. I spent so long in denial that I sometimes wondered if maybe Dalton really was the big bad supervillain the news had made him out to be. But in this moment, standing across from a man that looked triple the age of the brother I remembered, I knew deep down he was still my hero. He could have given himself a head start and escaped out the window, but he risked these few precious moments to see me one last time and say goodbye, and I wasn't ready for him to leave again. I wasn't okay with the jolt of panic I felt every time the news reported on the Liberation Front. I wasn't okay with my brother fighting for his life while the rest of us were barely brave enough to pay lip service to the cause he was literally dying for. I wasn't okay going back to the quarry and breaking my body for the same state I secretly hoped Dalton would destroy someday. And I wasn't okay with waiting 4 years to see him again, only for him to vanish minutes after coming back. Let me come with you.
Katja!
You don't want this.
Don't want? I don't want to go back to the quarry. I don't want to lose you again. Don't tell me I don't want to stay with you.
It's not safe, and you're...
Please don't leave me.
You will not leave with him.
I couldn't tell if Mom was trying to convince me or herself. Dalton's head snapped to the side, listening for something neither my mom or I could hear, but I could tell by his expression that whatever he heard meant trouble. With inhuman speed, Dalton crossed the room, scooped me up as if I were a newborn baby, and vaulted up the stairs in a single bound.
Katja Whitaker, get back here this instant!
The house became a blur as Dalton charged through my room and smashed through the window. He landed on the neighbor's roof and continued on, leaping to the next house without stopping. We were moving faster than I had run the first time I tried out my augmentation, faster than any player I'd seen in the Major League, or even the members of the Justice Patrol Mom would watch on Hero TV. Each leap knocked the wind out of me before I had recovered from the last. Eventually, I settled for wrapping my arms around Dalton's neck and trusting him not to drop me. Over Dalton's shoulder, I saw flashlights shaking wildly in the darkness from the pursuit of the silhouetted figures holding them. Gunshots rang out around us. I buried my face in Dalton's chest just as he leapt down to ground level. My teeth rattled in my skull. He weaved over and around obstacles, vaulting fences, darting around trees, at some points leaping back onto a roof only to plummet back to the ground an instant later. My eyes were closed, but eventually I noticed the gunshots coming from farther and farther away, until they stopped entirely. Dalton had also stopped weaving back and forth, though he actually ran faster now that he was moving in a straight line. Where are we going?
Anywhere we can hide.
I looked around. Somehow Dalton had carried me all the way back to the bell tower, which he had just ducked behind. He motioned for me to climb onto his back, and in 3 big jumps, he'd hoisted us up to the top, where he finally collapsed against a support beam and caught his breath. I flopped down beside him and looked up at the massive bell hanging overhead. Dalton had been carrying me so long that it was nice to be able to look at something that wasn't just a blur. I thought you were going to leave me.
You told me not to.
You said it wasn't safe.
It's not.
After another long silence, I heard Dalton shift beside me. I looked over and saw him peeking around the pillar, scanning for something. What?
Shh. Quiet down. I heard something. Sounded like yelling.
I crawled over, and the two of us looked down and across the street to see a father playing with his child. The man carried his son above his head, his arms stretched out in front of him, as though he were flying through the air. The man threw the child 20 feet in the air, then jumped what must have been at least 10 feet to catch him.
Hiya, Dad!
My brother watched, stony-faced.
That might be the only memory that kid has of his father. He'll be long dead before his son.
I had just been thinking about how cute they were together, but Dalton had a point. It seemed innocent enough watching them, but the underlying implication was heartbreaking. I know why you left. I mean, I knew before, but I think I'm starting to really understand. Dalton shrugged.
It's not like you were a huge fan of the state to begin with.
I know, but I was a coward. It was too easy to say, the system sucks, but what are you going to do about it? And that whole time you were dying. And then I got augmented and I was dying. and everyone's just wasting away because they feel like there's no other option. And I knew that then, but I just forced myself not to think about it.
Katja, it's okay. Really?
But it's not! It's not fair that I spent so long doing nothing. It's not fair that you made the biggest sacrifice out of everyone, and you've had to fight this all on your own.
I didn't have to fight alone. Not until yesterday. Besides, you're here now, aren't you?
The reality of my decision finally sank in. Does that make me a member of the Liberation Front?
There is no Liberation Front. They're all dead. They'll still call you a villainess, though.
Everyone else is dead? Dalton shrugged.
I saw Slade escape during the raid. We should meet up with him and figure out some kind of plan.
I was pretty sure I'd heard Slade's name on the news. Not that they would have had anything to say about him, except that he was dangerous and unhinged. Do you know where he is?
He has some friends out on a farm in Little Creek. If he's still alive, he'll probably head there.
Why didn't you go straight to the farm?
Little Creek is like 50 miles away. I can't run that far with these injuries.
My eyes widen with realization. Oh, shit! Are you okay after carrying me so far? Dalton rubbed his side and winced.
Kinda. It's not awful, but I do need a rest.
You and me both. Dalton laced his hands behind his head and stretched out on his back. I curled up beside him and laid my head on his chest. I could feel his heart hammering away, 600 beats per minute. It didn't resemble any sound that should have come from a human.
I missed you a whole lot, sis.
I missed you too. I thought it would be hard to sleep, but my body had other plans. I couldn't remember a single thought that ran through my head before I was out cold.
Katja, get up.
I felt my body being jostled. What's going on?
Stay down. The Justice Patrol is here. We need to move.
I peeked down at the street cautiously. They were everywhere, flashlights shining in all directions. Some went door to door, interrogating neighbors. I couldn't hear if they were downstairs searching the bell tower, but my brother's expression said enough. Dalton opened the trap door and descended a few steps before he scooped me up and began descending the tower. It was almost pitch black in the stairwell, but he stepped confidently, as though he could see every step. He probably could. He stopped after only a few seconds.
They're coming up the stairs.
My heart pounded as he made his way back up. Can we just climb down?
They'd shoot us to pieces. Only option is to jump.
Are you serious? We're over 100 feet up! Dalton's face tightened. I could tell he didn't like the idea either. I tried to think of some other way down when I heard footsteps below, and I knew we were out of time.
No time. Don't scream.
Before I had a chance to react, we were hurtling through the air. What sounded like yelling from below was drowned out by the wind rushing past us as we plummeted from the tower. The force of the landing jolted through my entire body, and if it hadn't been for Dalton supporting my neck and cushioning the fall, I had no doubt that it would have killed me. I was still recovering from the impact when Dalton barked at me.
Move!
I had barely picked myself up when the crack of gunshots spurred me into action. Adrenaline drowned out the pain in my legs as I tore down the street and slipped between two houses, hoping they might shield me for a few seconds. The houses gave way to a backyard, but I kept running, vaulting over fences and dashing around corners. At some point, the panic began to fade, and I realized something was wrong. After ducking into an alley behind an apartment building, I peeked around the corner and saw Dalton had fallen behind. I waited a few seconds for him to catch up, but instead of charging ahead, he collapsed in a heap beside me. Are you okay?
I sprained both ankles on the landing. I'll have to hide. You need to keep running.
I've barely managed to survive even with your help. What chance do I have alone? I didn't tell him how scared I was for his sake. Dalton fished out an augmentation kit from his pocket and pressed it into my hand.
Do what you have to do.
Promise me you'll be okay. I knew what was about to happen, but I couldn't bring myself to admit it. Dalton didn't answer, but for the first time since he'd returned, his jaded despondence cracked, and I saw a deep sadness in his eyes.
Take the main road into Little Creek, then the third right onto Oak Ridge Drive. Look for the first farmhouse right after you pass the pond. I love you, Katja. Good luck.
I heard the sound of footsteps approaching rapidly. Before I could react, Dalton grabbed my arm and hurled me 40 feet into the air. I screamed in terror, looking down as the world retreated from me. It was a good throw. I only fell 5 or 6 feet from the highest point before landing on the roof of the apartment. I didn't see what happened next, but I heard it. The standoffs on Hero TV were always edited to look like long, epic fights, but whatever happened in that alley couldn't have taken longer than 6 seconds.
Target neutralized. Everyone, to my position.
I got to my feet and put my shaking hands on the edge of the roof. I didn't want to see my brother like this, but I had to know. I held my breath and leaned over. The flashlights from the 4 Justice Patrol officers illuminated the mess that was Dalton's body. Beside him was a fallen member of the Justice Patrol who looked as though his head had been smashed against the brick wall. My brother laid at an odd angle, bloodied and unmoving. He was dead, and it was my fault. If he hadn't been carrying me, he could have rolled the landing from the tower and been fine.
I thought I saw someone jump onto that roof.
Check it.
I pulled away from the edge just as I saw all 4 flashlights beaming up in my direction. I pushed the grief down and forced myself to focus on my surroundings. Only one door led down below, and jumping from this height would end the same for me as it had for Dalton. There was only one option. I stared at the vial in my hand. A needle was tied to the side with a string. I pricked my finger with the needle and counted the potency of the augmentation aloud, starting from the degree I'd augmented back when I first started working at the quarry. 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5. I tried not to think about how many years of my life were draining away, but I already knew. Going up to 10 gave me about 4 years left to live. Not that I'd actually lived that long. Most members of the Liberation Front were dead in a matter of months. I swirled the contents of the vial with the needle, then raised it to my lips with a trembling hand and swallowed the concoction in a single gulp. No going back now. I counted to 50 before the pain in my legs began to ebb to a shadow of its former self, and my senses sharpened. 3 floors down, I heard the marching footsteps of the Justice Patrol ascending to the roof. I rehearsed the directions Dalton had given me in my head before walking over to the edge of the building and looking down over the city. The door flew open with a bang, and uniformed officers rushed out onto the roof. The Justice Patrol arrived just in time to see a figure leaping from rooftop to rooftop before vanishing into the night.
Hi, my name is Kevin, and I am the author of Villainess. First off, I just want to say thank you for listening all the way to the end, and thank you to all of my voice actors who made this possible. We have Roxanne Nylen as Katja Whitaker, Austin Murphy as Dalton Whitaker, Tyler Winigman as the Radioman, TuxedoAugust as Wes, Benjamin Weeks as Vergil, Drew Veurink as Modi, Sandwich Crumbs as Katja's mother, Angela N. as the child, and Matt Farmer and AJ Bull voicing the Justice Patrol. The sound effects used were downloaded from Pixabay, and the intro and outro music are The Streak by Gagmi Sharkov. Thanks again for listening, and have a wonderful day.